Ao vivo! We are live!
We are live!
Yeah.
Yes, I need a better hat. All right, let's see. What do you like? Do you like the turtle hat? Does that come out?
Awesome.
We have the turtle hat, or we have the bunny hat.
Oh, bunny hat's cute.
I don't know if the bunny hat fits on my headphones. Is the only problem. Might fall off. I guess. Oh man, our entire hat box is in here. I have like a whole choice of hats. We have like a porcelain conductor I can go with. This like nice clown hat that I can work with. Yeah.
How can we just make
I think we can create a pool to choose the hat.
Yeah. Ooh, this is a good one. This is a Halloween one for all your spider fans. Ooh. Nice spider hat. We're a big Halloween costume family here, so
Awesome.
we have a specific drawer for hats. You can't see it, but it says hats. We actually have 3 different organized boxes for hats. We have hats, small hats, and tiny hats. That's how many hats we own. That's how many discerning sizes of hats. Oh, this is a cool cupcake one my wife made. She made this out of like plastic bags. She like grouped all these plastic bags together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Really nice.
Got strawberries there. I don't know. They don't really play well with Surface headphones though, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We need to get some earbuds.
Oh. So let me do a Portuguese intro here before we start. Fala galera, começamos mais um dia, o último de maratona. Deixa eu parar essa música no fundo aqui. Poxa, deixa eu dar um alô aí pro Wesley, pro Ione, pro Wallace, pro Robson, pro Altevir, pro Luciano, Marcão, Serjão. Então, o negócio da barba é o seguinte, tá? Como o Ângelo não pintou a barba, ele vai pagar o iFood que a gente vai sortear no final da live para as pessoas. Ele que vai pagar esse iFood.
Fechado.
Então, já fica esperto aí que ele vai pagar o iFood para a galera, vai ser o sorteio dessa live.
Beleza, fechado.
Pessoal, hoje a gente tem o Shane aqui, grande convidado, mas antes de eu começar o rolê todo, deixa eu dar um boa noite, boa tarde, internet para Jesus, né? Em primeiro lugar para Jesus.
Sempre, né? Poxa.
Depois, Magulão, dá um alô aí para a galera.
E aí, galera, como é que vocês estão? Deixem aí embaixo no chat as suas dúvidas, que hoje a gente está com alguém que construiu o Shelll, então é a hora de aproveitar.
A gente está com o Pai, o Filho, né, e o Espírito Santo.
Aliás, Magu, eu tô com inveja dessa sua barba, Magu. Eu vou falar para você, cara.
Cara, ô Magu, eu pintei a barba de verde, tá? Minha barba está verde nesse momento. E tá uma desgraça, porque tá coçando pra cá, tá tudo duro. Meu Deus do céu, como tá tirar esse negócio. Mas, tô pagando a dívida, né, Ângelo? Tô pagando a dívida, tá?
Os caras estão falando que eu amarelei, mano.
Mas é a vida, né? Sempre amarelo.
Mas é verdade, né?
Sempre amarelo. Sempre amarelo. Nunca duvidei. So, let's switch to English. Pessoal, before that, pessoal, quem tiver dúvida pode mandar em português que a gente traduz para o Shane, tá? A gente vai tentar fazer um... Diga lá.
Falar um pouco antes da... Você pode passar depois o link daquela campanha?
Claro,
pessoal,
eu vou deixar ela rodando aí enquanto você está falando.
Acho que o link é grande porque é do Instagram. Não sei se vai dar para resumir, mas
a gente faz as duas coisas ali. A gente põe aqui. Aí. E aí depois eu deixo aqui, ó. Lá.
Show. Então, galera, quem tiver a fim de me pagar um café ou coisa do tipo, em vez disso, contribui para essa campanha aí que o pessoal está fazendo lá em Ouro Preto para arrecadar alimentos e dinheiro para as pessoas que estão passando necessidades aí por conta da situação pandêmica e tal. Vai ser muito bacana. Quem quiser e puder ajudar. Valeu.
Inclusive, Jesus, a gente pode puxar até uma live com colocar um QR Code, alguma coisa específica para essa campanha aí. Vamos desenrolar isso nessa semana.
Uhum.
Que acho que é
Vamos
bem
fazer.
legal.
Yeah.
Vamos
Seria
sim.
massa
fazer.
demais. Ô, Jesus, o Elton Mitruz falou, Magu looks like Gandalf and William like Treebird. Amazing.
So let's
Yeah.
switch to English, and we can talk a little bit in English and a little bit in Portuguese. So Shane learned some words in Portuguese, right? So we have some switches. So how can we start?
I think before Shane could introduce himself. I don't know if
Yeah,
the
yeah,
people on the
sorry.
chat know him. Super
Hello.
rockstar.
Hello. Let's see. I'm Shane. I'm on the Xamarin Forms Maui team. I've been on the team since about 2017. Yeah, so I'm a senior developer with Microsoft. You'll see my Twitch handle there next to my name. If you want to follow me on there, will be lots of Maui updates and accessibility stuff. Been working with Magul on the call actually a lot with accessibility stuff, so which has been really fun. Yeah, so mainly a lot of work in Shelll, Maui, and accessibility at this point. So that's my story.
Maybe we can talk about React UI because there are a couple of questions about your presentation last year, I think, or so.
On the React UI Conf, I think.
Yes.
Oh yeah, reactive UI. Let's see. Talk about your presentation. If there were particular highlight points about the presentation, it's on YouTube. I know if you go to the React Conf, it's on YouTube. I talk about reactive stuff. I think during the React Conf was a lot of Maui though, wasn't it? I don't think I did very much actual reactive talk. Now that I think about it, I think the reactive one was more of like a Maui structural conversation. I don't think I really talked about reactive UI, but I don't know, reactive UI. If you're doing MVVM or any programming, you should just use reactive UI. I don't know. I don't even know, like MVVM to me always just felt super weird and kludgy. I always just felt like I was bad at it. Until I got reactive UI, and then I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I can make this work. Like, I don't know, the whole thing with MVVM and like composite properties and making sure your right property changes things fire and creating aggregates of events and things, it's just it's so painful. But then like reactive UI is amazing. It's cool. You create like this garden of observables that you can just operate against for all these dynamic aspects of your application. It's really cool. So I don't know. It's awesome. I like reactive UI. It's cool. You do things like you get a cool like logged in observable that you can just look at and do stuff. And then you can set up the observables that are based on these other observables so they delay until like your app starts. Like you just create these event chains of your entire application, and it makes the entire thing just trivial. It's awesome. Plus you don't have to deal with all the weirdness of TPL. Like tasks are just weird. You know what I mean? Like having to throw configure await on everything and understanding async void and understanding like, you know, do I use task.start factory and all these things? Just observables. They're easy. Compresses it all down to just a way more palatable, reliable API. So I don't know. That wasn't really what my reactive UI talk was about, but that was my reactive soapbox. So yeah. Can we use reactive UI and akka.net together? I don't know if you would. I haven't used akka.net very much. I mean, akka.net is like an actor framework, right? So like that's kind of like service fabric and things like that, if I remember correctly. So I think there's sort of reactive based actor frameworks, but I don't think you'd use reactive UI because reactive UI is more just, it's an MVVM extrapolation of reactive X. So you can use reactive X, like the RX extensions with akka.net, but you wouldn't use reactive UI with Akanet. I guess is how I would put it. Yeah, because reactive UI is very much about MVVM stuff. It's about reactifying the whole MVVM. Like it comes with like reactive commands and reactive property changed events and things like that. So it's very much focused around all that. And like they generate, like they generate these NuGets basically that are extrapolations of the entire Xamarin Forms API, so you can use observables on like any events and things like that. So it's yeah, I don't know. It's good stuff. So I think that answered it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's the YouTube link. There's a couple of them there.
Yeah, and there's some awesome photos of your cat on the slide, right? This stuff.
Yeah, it took me a little bit to find one. I had to mine through them. It's all right.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's in here. No, he's not in here.
So there's one question about Maui. Yeah, which MVVM framework do you recommend for Xamarin, and which for Maui?
I mean, it doesn't, same, whatever you want to use. I mean, the MVVM story doesn't really change at all with Maui. Like the whole Xamarin so the Xamarin Forms is becoming what's called Maui controls. So if you ever hear someone say Maui controls, that's effectively what Xamarin is. That's what Xamarin Forms is becoming. But all the MVVM aspects of it are the same. So like at some point, reactive UI, Prism, tiny MVVM, all of those are just going to recompile with new namespaces. And then like all they really have to do is, you know, add the Maui NuGets, change their namespaces, recompile, and then they're ready to rock. And then your MVVM story isn't really going to change. The only aspects of things that'll sort of improve is that there's a lot better lifecycle story with Maui. So like Maui has integration with all the like Microsoft extension hosting components. So it has integration with things like you know, like iService provider stuff, like the ASP.NET Core things have. So it has the whole concept of like a builder pattern and like a startup file if you've ever done ASP.NET Core. And then you can plug anything, any sort of DI containers or things like that you use, you can plug into it. So you can plug like AutoFac, or you can plug like the Microsoft extension hostings one into it. And then at that point, you get all the benefits of that. So you get all the constructor injection, and you get all of those features as well. So it'll be, I mean, it's the MVVM story is the same as far as the frameworks, but then there's just some added layers where if you don't even use an MVVM framework, there's a lot more baked in experience that you can use, which will be nice, if that makes sense.
And Microsoft is working with the Prism team and Team MVVM team to create some tools to migrate. There's a plan to create a migrating tools.
Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know the story on the tools, on the migrating tools. If there's what's going to come down the pipeline with the tools. A lot of the tools I think are going to be more helpful at the user side of the spectrum, because like Prism, for example, Prism is largely an XPlat framework. So it for the most part relies all on Xamarin Forms bits, and most of the Xamarin Forms APIs aren't really changing. Like the only things that are kind of the only things that are sort of changing, like some of the larger changes are that we pulled in Microsoft.maui.graphics, which is something that James Clancy and Lipsky had which is this graphics library, which is going to make doing like drawn stuff a lot easier. So like all of our primitives for drawing, like colors and rectangle and those things, now come from that library. but for the most part, it's still just namespace changes. So a library like Prism, or TinyMVM or things like that, really, they're just going to have to load it up. Everywhere you see Xamarin Forms, they're going to using Xamarin Forms. They're just going to change that to using Microsoft.maui.controls. And then at that point, they'll just, there might be a couple APIs that they have to change, but that's really it. And then it comes into, at that point, it comes into where you want to elevate your app. So like a lot of the Maui stuff is using the builder patterns, for example. So, you know, like before when you were doing like FF image loading or Prism, you'd have to go into a lot of times you'd have to go into the native platform and you'd have to do like, you know, FFF image loading .init blah, blah, blah. So now when like FF image loading creates the Maui component, it'll create like a builder extension, right? So that in your startup, all you do is go builder.use FF image loading. And then like, that's it. You just do that in your cross-platform code. And now FF image loading is all set up and ready to go. So you don't have like the weird init calls anymore that you have to worry about inside all your different platform heads. And like, that was always weird, right? Because you're always like, what order do I put this in? Do I put it before the forms? Do I put it after the forms? And things like that. So yeah, the library itself just converts over. And then at that point, it becomes what aspects of the lifecycle parts of Maui that you want to embrace.
Great.
So, yeah.
We have a lot of questions. Pessoal, por favor, mandem perguntas aí.
Yeah, we have a question from asking for Shelll. It's asking, is it possible to categorize items in Shelll, something like sessions? I don't know this one. Do you know, Shane?
Categorize items in Shelll, something like sections. I don't fully follow the question, categorize items in Shelll.
Sérgio, você pode explicar um pouco melhor, por favor? Pode falar em português que a gente traduz. Talking to him to explain a little bit better the question. Also, we have one from our GitHub for this show. The Nelson Santos is asking if there is a way to rename the more button on the bottom tabs. You know, when we have like more 5 or 6 tabs, we have like that more buttons. And he's asking if you can change that label.
I don't think there's a cross-platform API for it. I feel like I thought someone was working on something of that nature, but you'd probably have to do a custom renderer for that, if I remember correctly. I don't know. I was just checking our repository real quick just to see if something came up. But yeah, I don't know offhand. I think you can change the ID on Android that might change it. But that one, I'm not sure on that one. That one, I'll have to get back to you on that one.
I just need to give a message em português.
Ok.
Pessoal, esse QR Code que está ali no topo, se você pegar o teu celular, aproximar da tela e ler, vai apontar para a corrente lá que o Jesus comentou, né, campanha de solidariedade lá para vocês poderem contribuir com a Ariane e Ouro Preto, tá? Só ler o QR Code e vai direto para o link lá onde tem mais informações. Beleza?
Mandem perguntas também sobre Shelll.
Sobre Shelll. Não, é isso mesmo. So, I want to just say to change that we add a QR code on the screen, so pointing to a campaign to raise money for people that is suffering with the pandemic.
Oh, awesome.
I have a lot of questions. I have a question about the hosted generators. There's a plan to add some feature to improve maybe a specific part of code that use reflection or activators and replace to create by hosted generator. There's a plan, or
The place for the code generators and stuff, I think the story there is still evolving a little bit, because we haven't necessarily hit a place yet where it's fully needed. So some of the places for generators are, so like, for example, in forms, you do all the export render stuff, but like in Maui, we're basically just going to explicitly register each renderer. Like, we're not going to really do any assembly scanning or anything like that. So, I mean, there's a possibility that we might add some attribution or things like that that'll sort of, excuse me, that'll sort of generate generate some of that stuff for you. But we haven't quite hit a point yet where we need to do any sort of generation. So that's going to come into play a little bit once we start dissecting the linker parts as well. One of the nifty things about sort of switching over to all the Net 6 stuff is that it's using sort of a different linker technology than like the mono linker. So there's a lot of features that we can do to sort of tune the linker to better figure out kind of like what types to keep and what types not to keep and things like that. So at this point, I don't know if there's any scenarios yet where we're using like code generation, where we plan on using code generation for yet. So some of the things we thought we were going to use it for, it's turned out that we don't really need to. So we'll kind of see how that evolves. So yeah, that code generators might be kind of more of a version 2 thing once we sort of get a little bit more of the other foundation stuff in there, and then have like a better idea of the stuff to kind of code generate, if that makes sense. I've been slowly looking through how to change the more string.
Okay.
I don't remember on iOS. I didn't see the iOS code. So I remember this. I think Gerald did a PR for this. On Android, you can set, I don't know if I can I type stuff in the comments? I don't think I can type stuff in the comments.
Oh no, it's just on the private chat, and you can copy and paste it there.
Okay, there's a resource ID that you can set on Android. And if you set that resource ID, it'll change the string for you. I'm not sure on iOS what the equivalent is, because I think on iOS the more button is just using the default that it does for a more button. And that's kind of what you're seeing is just the iOS string for that button. So I think you'd have to do like a custom Shelll item renderer and then modify what that more button says, if I'm thinking of it in my head correctly.
Got it.
Yeah, and then the story with a lot of that stuff is also going to get better with the Maui things, because the cool thing about Maui is that all of the handlers and the native bits are accessible from your explat code. So like if you want to tap into a Shelll renderer, you can just kind of do it at the you can just do it right at the cross-platform level. So like I've been working on the navigation stacks, for example, and like the navigation stacks now, basically from cross-platform code, if you're like in an Android context, you can grab the navigation page, and then you can grab the native view associated with the navigation page, which is just going to be your navigation layout. And from there, you can just kind of grab the toolbar or do anything you want with that. Like, you don't have to try to figure out how to create this renderer and then figure out the renderer or anything like that. Like, it's basically just things that are operating against these native views. So there's a lot less distance between getting to kind of what you need to be able to do. So even like I was talking about, like the more tab stuff on Shelll, you'll have a better hook where you can just kind of get right at the native component if we haven't sort of exposed that API for you. So yeah.
Yeah. Since now you are working on navigation stuff for Maui and stuff like that, there is a more clarification how Shelll will looks like on Maui, or if it will change for some parts.
No, not currently. Because currently everything is in the bucket of getting set up for Maui. Like getting everything converted to the handlers. There's a lot of foundation stuff that's changing, and then once that foundation is there, then we can build on top of it more successfully. We can move sort of with a better velocity. So that's kind of one of the big reasons for the shift, is that Maui in itself isn't like a complete rewrite, if that makes sense. Like it's like, for example, today they we're working on some code, and Dave was like, hey, I need to be able to set the background color on the nav bar. And so I basically went over to the navigation page renderer, copied the code that sets the tab bar, pasted that into Maui, and now the tab bar changes color. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a refactoring of the code. So it's not like it's a refactoring of it in a more sane fashion, so that it's a lot more powerful. So like one really basic example is Android native layout inflation. Like, native layout inflation in forms was almost impossible because the way renderers work, because renderers inherit directly from native components. Whereas in Maui, you have this cool abstraction with the handlers, where you can kind of just do whatever you want. So it thins out the layout hierarchy. You don't have all these view wrappings, which helps performance, and it also super helps out accessibility, because a lot of accessibility issues in forms have to do with how many layers of views are there. So that'll help a lot. So a lot of it is sort of making the guts, taking all the good parts of forms, organizing them into a much more straightforward fashion, and then being able to build upon that with a quicker velocity. Because at this point, hopefully my dates aren't wrong here, but at this point, forms is like 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in there where it's just, the Android navigation stuff, the Windows navigation stuff. A lot of that is based on really old concepts, So a lot of it is very much us being able to kind of modernize a lot of those things. Just modernize the theming, like any of those things. So it's nice. It's fun once you start like really diving into coding with it. So
yeah, I can say that because I have been working on some little PRs, and also, as you said, you are doing a refactoring from the form, so it's not starting something from the scratch, but also is a good chance to improve or implement the new stuff, like the image search that Matthew was working. That new concept of the image search that probably will be much easier to work than is on forms today. That code.
Yeah. I mean, that thing was super late. Like I mean, you worked on the what was it? If there's like a failed image, load something else code.
Yeah, placeholder image, I think.
Yeah, and like that code was nasty to write, because it's just like the Android image loading code was like 9 levels deep, and that like would use like different. It just kept kind of getting. It was almost like if you've seen that XCD cartoon where there's 10 standards, and they're like, oh, let's create a new standard, so there's only one, and then at the end of it, there's like, well, now there's 11. Like, that's how the Android image loading code is. We kept adding new ways to make it better, so there was like 10 different ways to load your images. So yeah, I mean, all of that is being normalized. Android is now using Glide for all of its image loading. Which is going to vastly improve performance for Android images. Like, it's no longer sort of our own baked in. We're using tried and true we're using tried and true mechanisms for doing that stuff. So yeah, so like that, those are the things that are really elevating it, you know, is being able to use Glide for stuff, is being able to base forms, being able to base Maui on top of the app extension hosting stuff. So it's a familiar programming model. You know, all the integration now that's going to be having with Blazor. So that's where, let's see, so that's like where that I'm sort of leading into this question. The game changer from Xamarin to Maui, a lot of the game changer stuff is really going to be just a lot of the scenarios that open up here. So as you can see, Clancy has been building Comet on top of all of the forms bits, right? So he's building his sort of MVU-ish framework on top of all the bits that we're having. So like MVU in its own, Comet in its own way is kind of a game changer for how you can build your UIs. You know, people who really like Swift UI paradigms and things like that, you know, they're going to be able to use Comet. And then frameworks like Fabulous for people who really like, you know, Elmish style programming will have, you know, they'll be able to make a much more efficient language against it. The pulling in of Maui.graphics, like Maui.graphics is a fully baked drawing framework that's cross-platform, right? So it's a fully baked platform that there's an obvious word here I'm forgetting, but that abstracts away all the drawing stuff. So being able to now have all of this drawing at your fingertips is now going to really enable a lot of the draw and control features as well. So like a lot of the stuff that Javier is building is now being based on those drawn APIs. So there's already this entire framework of drawing that now we're also basing things on. You know, so it's sort of this, it's almost like when, you know, it's like when before Xamarin Essentials, remember there was all those different plugins that you had? And then those all came together in Essentials. And like Essentials is a massively useful framework. So it's kind of like that idea. It's this bringing together of all these different, of all these sort of current ideas so that we can kind of elevate to, we can sort of elevate faster, at a much faster pace for developer needs. So being able to do, you know, symmetrical APIs and things like that. A lot of the code, a lot of the layout code that Easy is working on is going to be really big as far as simplifying users' experiences. But yeah, I think the game changer aspects are going to be Blazor stuff, the stuff that it's built on, the extension hostings, so you get sort of a much more powerful framework just in the box. Like you don't have to use an MVVM framework. The stuff that like Comet's doing, a lot of the tooling with the reloading is going to vastly improve the developer experience. So yeah, I don't know on what, a lot of the reloading stuff is really going to, so like James, for example, on Comet has a VS Code extension where he's coding Comet all in VS Code, and it's doing hot reloading as he's writing code, like C# code. You know what I mean? So I mean, I realize that that's kind of, you know, something that other frameworks, competitor frameworks have offered, but like those are the things that are, this is all the stuff that's really letting us modernize and then elevate to a lot of sort of game-changing aspects. So that's the thing, is it's just, you know, there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of stuff we're kind of stuck with. So now we're sort of like, let's shed all that. Let's all come together. And then, yeah, which is cool, because then that's why you see this with the WinUI 3 stuff as well. You know, our whole UWP framework is shifting to the WinUI 3 platform as well. So now we're modernizing with the WinUI team as well on top of their entire framework. So it's just, I don't know, it's just, it's just exciting because there's like 15 different things that have been in development, I feel like, for the past like 2 years that are all just coming together this year into this, under this umbrella that is Net 6. So it's cool, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of, it's kind of bittersweet to see the whole Xamarin name and those things kind of going away, but being brought into something where it's like, you want to build a mobile app? Cool. You just go .NET new Android app. Now you have a Net 6 Android target. Awesome. All right, start app. Boom, you're ready to go. You're writing an Android app, all within like the .NET CLI tooling. So there's things like that, which is just really making it cohesive within the entire .NET ecosystem, which is really, really cool. So it's just, I don't know, it's exciting for the developers as well to kind of be playing with all those teams in those worlds as well. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So
can
you?
Sorry, Will, but I'm really excited about the MCU, Maui Cinematic Universe. So a lot of things happening. And just a really quick question, Shane. But can we respect a kind of mix between Shelll and Xamarin Community Toolkit tabs for Maui, or not for now?
yeah, so we'll see. That's definitely, I mean, we'll see. Oh, I guess we'll say, all right, so we'll see in the short term, but that's the definite plan for the long term, is how I'll state that one. So the definite plan currently is to things like the tab view and the app bar is to make those standard features inside the box with Maui. So like it's not even like you would use the community toolkit to use the tab bar or anything. Like the idea is that you would just use the tab bar. We'll just have Javier's tab bar inside Maui controls and just use that, you know? So there's still some experimenting going on, sort of figuring out what the timeline for that looks like. Like, does it make sense? Does it make sense to go, you know, to do just YOLO the whole thing and just be like, cool, we're pulling tab bar in, we're getting rid of being dependent on tab layout and bottom navigation view and UI tab bar controller, and we're just going to pull in Javier's tab view. We're just going to use that, and then that's what we're going to do, you know, which might happen, but we're still kind of evolving the way that story looks, just because, you know, there's kind of a short timeline to get all this stuff stable. So we want to make sure that the really neat stuff, especially like the tab view, and so that's kind of another aspect of the game changer. Glad you mentioned that, was that really pulling in all the stuff Javier's doing and making sure that cross-platform experience. So I know during one of the Monkey Fests, for example, I showed grabbing that tab bar into Shelll and creating these cool animations and things like that. So like using his tab bar inside Shelll and stuff like that isn't too tricky. So it's that's definitely a one. We're so, like, in my head, I'm driving down the direction of doing that, but we'll just kind of see. We'll kind of see how that goes.
Sure, no, I understand. I really understand.
That code is open source or no? That you presented on Monkey Fest.
I mean, unfortunately, I didn't get to go as far with that stuff as I'd like. It's just sort of hacked together in a branch. So that's the other thing too, is a lot of the code that I hacked together in for that Monkey Fest is code that I'm planning on using inside of Maui. So like at the Monkey Fest where I was showing the title view, that's like the full bar, you know, like I have that fully working in Android. So my plan is to take that, like when I do title views in Maui, I'm just going to take the code I did for Monkey Fest, and that's going to be the title view in Maui. You know what I mean? So unless I hit weird issues, you know, Maui's going to have the full title views. Like that's currently my plan, unless I get tripped up. So there's kind of this balance between there's kind of this weird balance between do we need to, like, what can we modernize? What makes sense to just base on the old stuff for now, and then we can modernize down the road, just so we can make sure all those fundamental bits are the same. because a lot of the thing is that most of the stuff that's in Maui, in Xamarin Forms, ports over to Maui without any issues. So like, for example, last night, you know, it took me like half an episode of Frasier to port the WinUI Shelll renderer code over to Maui. You know, like it took pretty much no time at all, because it's fundamentally not that different. Like an iView handler, if you look at the interfaces iView handler and iVisual element renderer, they're 99% the same. They basically do the same stuff. So like all I had to do was pull the Shelll renderer into Maui, and anywhere it said iVisual element renderer, I changed that to iView handler, and then it basically just worked. You know, so there's a lot of those controls we can just copy and paste into Maui, and they'll just work. But there's a lot of that stuff that we want to sort of organize better. So like, for example, right now, I'm spiking through basing our Android stuff on like the jet navigation components, because those have a much stronger story than doing fragment manipulation on Android. But we'll see. I'm optimistic, but I hope, if anybody's done a lot of stuff with the Android navigation components, hit me up on Twitter. Let me know your experiences. So far, it's going great. So far, I think it's amazing, and I'm super excited about it. So like, for example, right now, our navigation page in Maui is based on the jet navigation components, and it just inherently supports resuming. So like, at this point, like this is even one of those really small, it's a lot of these small gotchas that we're really fixing. So right now in Android, if you're like 3 pages in and your app backgrounds from low memory, and then it comes back, in Maui, you're going to go back to that 3rd page, and the user is not going to know what happened at all. You know, whereas in Xamarin Forms, that was never the case. In Xamarin Forms, it would call your create, which would then create your app, and then create everything again. Whereas in Forms, in Maui, it's not going to do that. You know, it's small things like that of really sort of fixing all those little annoyances like that and making it just a much better experience. So yeah, so I'm excited to modernize the Android aspects, and then Windows as well, to base more, like a lot of the Windows stuff. I mean, there's been the Xamarin Forms platform, if you've been around with Xamarin Forms, like it was initially built, I think, on Windows 7, right? And then like it was Windows 8, and then it was Windows 8 RT, and then it was upgraded to UWP. So much of that has lived through, you know, the past 7 years of Windows, right? So it's like, you know, at this point now in Maui, it's like, all right, well, let's just kind of take all that stuff. Let's base a lot of it on the code we wrote for Shelll, and sort of modernize the WinUI stuff as well. Yeah, so that'll be cool.
Yeah, that sounds great. All those
Will,
changes.
eu acho que o pessoal tá falando sobre o link do Discord, cara, que tá com problema.
I can change that. So I just wanted to go back to Sergio's question about it's possible to categorize items in Shelll. He was talking about the menu, so we can create some sections on the flyout menu.
The flyout menu. Ish. I mean, it kind of depends what you want to do as far as the grouping. So there's a couple. Let's see if these docs got updated. There's a couple ways you can do this. So there's the flyout options here. Let me just paste this into the chat. And so this is a way you can sort of organize the into different groups, and then it kind of does everything like with these lines. But in 5.0, I'm trying to see if I don't know if the docs got updated with the new, oh, there it is. Yeah, all right, cool. So in 5.0, it's nice because we added a flyout content property, which basically lets you, here we go. Let me post this as an example. So that was one of my big pushes with 5.0. Like I knew 5.0 was going to be sort of our last major release. And like I really wanted to try to get the flyout in a happy place where you could do almost anything with it. So I just posted another link to our docs. And so basically what you can do in your flyout is you can replace the entire thing. And then what you get there is a data structure representing your flyout items. And those are all sort of grouped together. So you'll see in the sample there on our documentation where I'm binding it to a collection view. So you can bind it to a collection view, and then in the collection view, you can kind of group it however you want. Yeah, so a lot of that is just kind of however you want it to come through. Yeah, so those are the options now. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and just a reminder that I showed that on the flyout video that we made here, I think 2 weeks ago. So yeah, that is a live sample for the people.
So that stuff's really good because you can do the flyout header, you can do a flyout footer now, thanks to I think Andrew was who did that. Sorry,
yeah, it's Andrew.
Yeah, okay, who did that one? So he did the footer, which is awesome. So you can do the header, the footer. The header, if you put the flyout content in a scroll view, you still get the header options. So the header will still do all the stuff with expanding and things. Or you could just completely ditch the header and the footer and then just use your flyout content to do whatever you want in that flyout. So that really sort of lets you do a lot of it really lets you sort of do a dynamic. And it's nice because you can bind to those flyout items. So you basically just have that set up. And then once we get some sort of seg navigation or something put in there, it'll be way more automated. But yeah.
So I have a question about macOS support. Microsoft don't support macOS in Xamarin formats, but now in Maui will support it. We see Javier working on Linux support, but we don't know if Microsoft will support or just the community support. There's a plan to add Linux as first-class citizen in Maui. It's most required feature, I think.
I mean, Dave would probably be the better one to fully answer that one. So, I mean, the driving element of any platform the driving element of any platform is the balance between developer time to work on those platforms versus need and things like that. So it's always kind of a measure of how that all plays out. So I mean, that's just kind of something it depends how a lot of that stuff gets driven. A lot of the Maui architecture makes it easier to reliably create a platform for things because of the way it's designed. But yeah, I mean, at this point, it's like, for especially the first release, we're focusing on, iOS, Catalyst, Android, WinUI, get those all stable and awesome. And then you'll have like the Linux stuff, community supported, and then just kind of seeing where the interest in that goes and things like that. Will sort of drive how that works out. So, I mean, I could see the Linux stuff playing out. I mean, this is not official in any way, shape, or form. This is me just making up futures that might exist. But like, in theory, we're pulling in all these drawing things, right? Javier is working on all these drawn controls. So we have all this effort working on these drawn controls. Once we have these drawn controls, those are controls that are going to work in a cross-platform way in a cross-platform way in a much more effective fashion, right? So that's the other nice thing about the Maui.graphics is Maui.graphics already has all these drawing APIs for the platforms. I honestly can't say if it works if they have one in Linux, but I feel like they should. And if they don't, you just sort of create that drawing platform, and now you get that full array of controls, right? So as we're sort of building up some of those drawn controls, that makes the adoption of these other platforms easier as well. So that's another one of those things where it's a lot of it's about the long-term vision of stuff. right? So a lot of this is building out those foundation pieces so that the long-term vision can much more easily pull this stuff in, right? Because like in Xamarin Forms, if we wanted to add GDK in Linux, it's all just building up from the ground up. So like that was a big reason we pulled on Catalyst, was because we're like, okay, we can use Catalyst to still get that Mac OS apps. And then once we sort of start building out these drawn controls, then we can start looking at other platforms for those as well. Yeah, because that'll really open up the scenario of those other platforms. So I don't really know very much about the Linux side of any of this. So that's just sort of me imagining these other platforms. Oh, and then Tizen. Don't forget Tizen. The Tizen team is really they're doing a great job. Yeah, Tizen is pushing hard on all the Maui stuff and giving us PRs and things like that as well. So yeah, Tizen is along for the ride, and they're doing a great job.
Great.
So I have one question that we have a lot of people that are learning about Xamarin. So if you can give a advice, what should the Xamarin developer focus his studies for now on? For someone that it's starting creating apps, or for someone that is with more experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's still the Xamarin Forms stuff. Like the Xamarin Form, like what you develop in Maui isn't going to really change much. It's not like you're going to learn Xamarin Forms and then after like 2 years be like, oh, now I have to learn this Maui thing. Like it's, like I was saying, it's sort of the same thing. So it's a lot of the same, it's basically the same stuff, like going through, I know we have some learning modules. I know there's some Shelll learning modules I need to find. Yeah, I know we have
Microsoft Learn.
Yeah, I know. I think Microsoft Learn, there's some learning modules on Shelll and then a few other things. I don't have the links for those handy, but I think it's in Microsoft Learn. And those are kind of good places. So David Britch just did kind of a big one on Shelll. So that would be a good way to get going on Shelll. But unfortunately, I don't know. Do I have the, dang it, I don't have the link. Let me make a note to Microsoft Learn Shelll link. Okay, I made a note to grab the Microsoft Learn stuff. I don't remember where it is. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know there's some Learn modules out there that for Shelll, but well, I'll have to get back to you on that one. So those are kind of good ways. Let's see.
I found a link to the Xamarin form, to Microsoft Learn all things Xamarin, and I'm sharing with in the chat.
Okay, yeah. So I'm looking at that right now to see build mobile apps, create mobile apps with Xamarin Forms. Are these updated in Xamarin Android? Trying to see if these are kind of like the updated ones. I should have links to these things, but because here's one that's like 9 hours at the top. Is this one Shelll? Let's see. I'm just kind of looking through it to see, like clicking through the Learn module here just to see.
Yeah, a big one, 9 hours building.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking through that to see how, yeah, I need to get a little more familiar with the Learn module stuff, because I know there's a Shelll one that was done. So I'm just trying to see, and there's a few more that are coming through the pipeline as well. There's some accessibility ones that we're working on. Yeah, I don't see it on here. I don't know. I'll have to ask to see where those links are. I think there's some accessibility ones that are coming down the pipeline as well that users should look at. So yeah, we just checked in a bunch of really exciting accessibility tools into Xamarin Community Toolkit. That'll be a part of. So it's a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about on our calls, and it's a lot of the stuff you're going to see inside of Maui. So yeah, any feedback or uses of this stuff, it'll vastly improve your accessibility experience, and that's a big thing too that we're looking at in the Xamarin in the Maui space as well, is vastly improving a lot of the accessibility stuff. So I realized I got on kind of a tangent there. Yeah, I was trying to find.
Awesome.
I'm so confused right now. Oh, I'm in the wrong tab. Okay. Here it is. I do that so many times. I'm on like issues looking for PRs. But I'm so far down the rabbit hole of answering this question, I don't even know what I'm answering right now anymore. Oh, Microsoft Learn. That's what I want.
Microsoft Learn.
Yeah, the Learn modules are good. A lot of it depends on where you're starting. Like, it's interesting. It's interesting starting with things like Xamarin Forms, especially if you're a brand new .NET developer, because you're starting at this level of like, okay, what's mobile development? Okay, what's Xamarin Forms? Okay, what's XAML? All right, how does XAML work? Like XAML doesn't have the quickest ramp up for learning it. Like, I don't know how it went for all of you, but I know when I was first learning WPF, like, I don't know, a billion years ago, it was kind of confusing until it sort of all clicks the way this whole binding infrastructure works. So a lot of that, I'd say the learning modules are good. I'd say don't get caught up in XAML stuff too much, because there's a lot of stuff you can do in Forms without some of the XAML. Xamarin Community Toolkit, the code extensions are really powerful. So I think code extensions are a really good place for beginners to start out without sort of the overhead of XAML. Shelll is a good place to start out for beginners. Like, that's kind of the big push of it, is because it's this simplified model for your app where you don't have to worry about like your nav page nesting and a lot of those things. So that's kind of like a good way to get started. Is Shelll able to use MVU or MVVM? I mean, that's kind of, it's MVU and MVVM are sort of outside the domain of Shelll, I would say. Those are sort of just, that's another thing where people start to get overlap concepts a little bit. So for example, XAML, like if you think of XAML, like you don't have to use MVVM with XAML, right? Like MVVM is just a choice of how you can apply your bindings and stuff to your XAML. But you don't have to use MVVM, right? Like if you're learning Xamarin Forms, I would say don't worry about MVVM. Just kind of learn about the basics of how it works. And then once you get that, then you can start learning these other sort of frameworks on top of it. So MVU is kind of the same idea, is that, you can apply it on top of it. So for example, Fabulous, which is F#, has like an MVU structure on top of Shelll. But MVU is sort of outside the domain of Shelll or any of those things, right? Because MVU is much more about the way you're handling your messaging, your message loop, and how you're updating your UIs and stuff. So things like Comet and Fabulous have that much more built into the UI structure, whereas XAML isn't really built in such a way that necessarily caters to MVU, but you can still have MVU concepts there, right? Like if there's Elmish WPF that has like MVU over WPF, but it's still just kind of enabling it. It's not like a first-class citizen of it. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's the thing, is Shelll able to use MVU? I mean, yeah, technically you could. Like, you can use any of the stuff Comet's doing, and it'll work against Shelll. So at that point, it just becomes because a lot of Comet has to do with extension methods and things like that. So a lot of it'll be taking the extension methods that are part of the community toolkit, standardizing those into our own sort of extension method structure that's just part of the language, and that'll be something that Comet uses, and you can use for aspects of forms. So yeah, it'll just kind of be how a lot of that comes together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. There's a question about linker. Can you?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's from.
Go ahead.
I don't remember
Sergio Luis.
the name. Sergio Luis, from Sergio. There is a lot of. I mean, we get these questions a lot, right? About the app size. App size from Xamarin Forms app. So, do you have some benchmark comparison the actual app size, APK size from Xamarin and Maui? There is some plans to make this smaller.
Yeah, I don't have the metrics on that, but I know that it's a big focus. So there's a constant cite as we're developing through Maui on startup performance and app size. And there's a lot of things about the way Maui works that'll make your app size and linking more efficient. So like I was saying earlier, the linking is all based on like the .NET linkers, which are are much more featureful. So the idea there is that like if you're using a Maui app and you don't use like you don't use like Shelll, or you don't use like let's say you don't even use a button anywhere. The idea is that it's going to link out the button and the stuff, anything that has to do with the button. Like Xamarin Forms doesn't do that. Xamarin Forms has no linking because of the way the attributes work. Because everything is those assembly attributes, nothing in Forms gets linked out. But the way Maui works is that it's going to be super linker friendly. So anything you don't use will get linked out. And then there's a lot of work being done on the IPA and the APK sizes as well. So I'm not part of those conversations. I just know that that's a focus of the efforts is app size and startup performance.
Awesome.
Yeah. Also, I remember that you showed in some conference like that benchmark that you made for Maui, like a lot of labels changing on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, that was a little. That wasn't the most accurate sort of benchmark, because you can always fake those things to to fit what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, for example, benchmarking drawing random things on the screen using a Skia sharp layer is kind of like doesn't really tell you anything that interesting, right? Because it's just Skia sharp drawing stuff. So that's going to be the same anywhere. But it's like the whole point of that demo was sort of showing a comparison of the simplification. So with Forms, there's a lot of overhead with the layout system and things like that we're super reworking. So it was kind of the demonstration of that one was to kind of show where we are and where we can get to, if that makes sense. So it's kind of showing the idea that like, look, this is how fast it works when you're just running native, using our view handlers and using one of our layouts. This is how fast you can do it compared to Forms. So it's kind of saying like, okay, that's the gap. So now we understand what that is. And then like, how close to this performance aspect of things can we stay, if that makes sense? So that was the idea, is that the demo was very much just showing the simplification that Maui offers for your cross-platform application. That we're sort of removing all of the cruft, that it's just a very light layer over a native application. That it's much more focused on the native, letting native platforms do what the native platform needs to do. So that's what a lot of the work is towards.
Got it. Makes sense.
So I think we are on time, right, Jesus?
Yeah. Just let if someone has final question and
Yeah, it's the final.
I have a
Countdown.
final question, but
Go ahead.
for your. Okay, it's about run Maui on Linux to develop on VS Code. So I would love to use Maui on my Linux machine with VS Code. And
You just wanted to complicate stuff, right?
Okay.
But do you want to build like Android apps on Linux and using
I mean,
Code? Oh, yeah.
That's the thing is that's the scenario that Clancy is building for, especially with Comet, right? Like Clancy does all of his Comet development. As far as I know, he does it all in VS Code, from the command line and things like from VS Code deploying and hot reloading. So like he has the VS Code story working on the Comet side of things. So I mean that is definitely that's definitely a scenario that Maui super enables. I don't know how well that'll. He says he's had success. He has success with the stuff he's doing in Comet, working on the Maui controls side of things. So again, that's like I was saying before, is that a lot of the stuff that's coming together is sort of enabling these future scenarios. So like Comet can definitely work in VS Code, and then that sort of helps us get us into a place where it's the VS Code story for like Maui.controls is a lot better as well. So yeah, so that's the thing, is that it's not a big focus of Maui controls right now, but Comet works fully in VS Code because of it's working on top of Maui, if that makes sense. So it's a scenario that's a lot more plausible going down the road. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you want to start playing with the VS Code stuff, check out what the stuff that James Clancy's been doing. He has a lot of it has got checked into the Maui repository, Reloadify or something. I forget what it's called. But yeah, a lot of that got checked into the Maui repository. And I think on .NET Comet, he might have some samples of how, yeah, okay, cool. Pedro just posted that in there. So he might have some samples in there of how to use the VS Code. So you can kind of, a lot of his stuff talks about the MBU path, and a lot of his sort of talks about, I don't know, he has some of his Twitch streams and things like that with hooking up the reload. Yeah, here we go, hot reload. So if you look on his README, he talks about the hot reload stuff. I don't know if the VS Code stuff is on here. You could probably ping him on Twitter or something of that nature to see what he has for VS Code. I know he has it working. I don't know if the extension he has for it is public or not.
Oh, it is this Reloadify 3000.
Yeah, I know that's because
I posted the link on the chat as well.
All right, because I think that's a Visix. Ooh, I don't know. Did you hear that?
No.
That was, oh no. Okay, there was just a big loud thunder here at the house. Yeah, I think it might work with VS. These ones might work with VS Code. Yeah, so you can give that a try if you really want to get adventurous. Adventure. Yeah. So the final one from Jose. When do you recommend to use Maui, Uno platform, Avalonia UI, Electron, .NET, or Blazor bindings? Yeah, I mean, that's always a really hard question to ask, to answer, because it's very much, it's such a developer specific and project specific scenario. And I realize you're saying, when do you recommend? So I haven't used a lot of the other ones like Avalonia or Electron, so I can't really say too much about a lot of those. But yeah, I mean, a lot. It's just kind of what you really like. So like, if you super like, you want exact identical APIs as UWP,
and Win UI, and you want that exact same experience, then Uno's a good platform for that. If you don't like that level, that type of XAML, like Maui has a much more simplified XAML structure, then you can use a lot of the Maui bits. And then some of it too has to do with like what platforms you target. So I think Electron.net works on a few other platforms and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it really just depends on your use case, which I know you're definitely asking about, but I don't know. It's always just hard to, it's kind of like when people say, what MVVM framework should I use, right? Like, it's just kind of like you use what you're able to be productive in, which I know isn't the most helpful answer, but yeah, like, I don't know. I'm just trying to sort of think of the large differences among the platforms. But yeah, it just kind of depends what tooling you like, the experience you like, the community around it, a lot of the components and things like that, just how efficient you are able to be, like MVVM frameworks. Like, I would only ever use reactive UI, right? I would never use anything else. I would only use that because I feel like I don't need anything else to be efficient. So a lot of that, I think, is that you just kind of got to try it out and see which one sort of fits your model of programming. I mean, anything that's, I mean, really, I would recommend anything on top of .NET. So that's kind of the commonality there, because people are always talking about this whole like Uno versus Maui type thing, but it's not. Like, I was chatting with the Uno people last week about some Win UI stuff, and we were working around together how to get some of the templating and things worked with Win UI lists and things. You know what I mean? So it's like we're all working on the same. They work with the Win UI team. We work, like, we're all working together because we all want you all just to use .NET. So it's all very symbiotic kind of ways of building these things that let you accomplish these things in different ways. So yeah, and then it's a lot of it too is just like the tools that are available, right? Like Uno is a one-for-one extrapolation of Win UI, right? So if like that's what you want, then that's awesome. But like there's things like the Maui lets us sort of create our own concept of how to build these things. So you have things like Shelll, you have these things that are going to be baked in, like the way the extension hosting works, and a lot of those things where we've sort of taken a more opinionated direction to simplify things like XAML and stuff like that in a way that we think is more productive for developers. So if that's what you sort of like, then that's where you can kind of go with it. Yeah, so that's kind of the long answer to that one, if that hopefully helps to some extent. But yeah, I don't know. It's always hard to know. It's like, yeah, it's like when people are like, what music production software to use? Like, I don't know. Just use them all, and then you'll figure out what you like.
We always started that it depends.
Yeah, it's just
answer for that. Depends.
Yeah, it's so depends, and then it's a lot of it is just kind of finding what really clicks with you, because that's like I was saying with the reactive UI stuff. It's like that's what really clicks with me. Like I would never, anytime I would build a mobile app, I would just use reactive UI, and that's what I would use. Like I think they're, personally for me, I think all MVVM frameworks are pointless, but reactive UI is perfect. You know what I mean? Like that, but that's just me. Like I'm not saying they're pointless in the broader scheme of other people. I'm just saying that I don't get any benefit from anything but reactive UI. So like that's the only thing I'm going to use if I'm building an application. So
yeah, what I tell folks when he asks this is that look for the community around the tool, right? Because you can pick something that is not actively supported, right? So you maybe you have it's open source and you have trouble with, and I mean you don't find anything to help, and otherwise it's just do a PLC and see what fits to your product, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you just have to understand what's, because I know a lot of people sometimes get caught up on stuff like, oh, well, Electron or those work on like 9 different platforms. It's like, well, do you really care that it works on 9 platforms? Like, is that, advantageous for you? It's like, just don't, make your sacrifices in the right places. And so, I don't know, that's what it's a really fun part of Maui, is being able to just kind of build our own UI abstractions. So that's what's kind of fun. It's like, could we make Shelll and Comet things that sort of are so enticing that's why you would be using Maui, is because it makes your developer flow so efficient that you're able to just work, But if like you're a hardcore UWP developer and it's your favorite thing in the world for the past 10 years, then you're gonna love Uno. You know what I mean? So it's it really just kind of depends. Like like XAML's cool, but like I would rather use reactive or something like Comet, like I think, or something like Fabulous. Like I think I would only do web development using like Fable and like the safe stack, right? Because that's the only thing I've ever done web development. I'm like, okay, this is cool, I like this. But like, it's just kind of what clicks. And then it's also just developer expertise, because you get that a lot in teams, right? Like if all 5 of your developers only know a certain language, like you choose something in that sphere. So it's, I don't know. It's an interesting question to kind of go down. I try to stay sort of as conceptually agnostic as I can, as far as saying what to use, because it's good to sort of have that malleable perspective. But yeah, that's kind of the long-winded answer on that one.
So José just say that reactive UI is perfect.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's awesome. Like the community is super active on there. Rodney and all of them do a great job sort of pushing that stuff forward, and it's great. The chat on there is always super active. They're all super friendly to answer any questions over on the reactive UI Slack. It's a great community. So that's the other thing, like you were saying, right? Community. The reactive UI community is awesome. The whole reactive community in general is awesome. So that's like another really cool reason to use it. Is like they're super happy to help you learn everything about reactive.
And I will share the link to the reactive UI docs, so you guys can learn a little bit more.
Temos o negócio do iFood também aí. Podemos esquecer o sorteio.
I mean, I don't know how we'll do a giveaway right now, but we need to think about this. Angelo will pay some food for the people that is watching us. So I really don't know how can we do that. Yeah. So Shane, thank you very much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun. This was really fun.
You should come more.
Yeah, this is a nice format. It's nice, like, it's always stressful preparing demos and stuff. So it's nice just being able to hang out and just talk about stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's more fun to talk about things that we enjoy, right? So let me switch to Portuguese. Angelo, não sei como você vai fazer esse sorteio, mas vamos fazer assim, a gente faz o sorteio na live da semana que vem, que a gente vai continuar com a campanha de quem tem fome e tem pressa. Então, na semana que vem, durante a semana, a gente vai planejar uma live e aí a gente faz esse sorteio aí do iFood que o Angelo prometeu.
Vamos fazer o seguinte,
e aí a gente bola um formulário, sei lá, ou a gente doa para quem doar ali, mostrar o comprovante que doou, sei lá. sorteio.
Vamos fazer o seguinte, então, na próxima, ao invés da gente faz eu faço 2 doações. Uma para quem ganhou e uma para o pessoal do Quem Tem Fome Tem Pressa também. A gente faz um bem bolado para fazer essa doação aí.
Boa.
Fechado? A gente vai fazer 2 doações aí.
Fechado.
Tá aqui na responsa. Semana que vem a gente marca outro. E a gente desembola. Fica atento aí, pessoal, no Twitter, que a gente vai desenrolar isso
divulgar
daí.
Lá. Ou aproveita, se inscreve no canal lá, aperta a notificação, que aí quando a gente tá ao vivo, você recebe a notificação. E também ajuda a gente para chegar, favorece os algoritmos a posicionarem o nosso vídeo para pessoas que têm interesse com Xamarin. Se você dá um like, aí ajuda a gente a levar a palavra mais longe. É isso. Just that. We are talking about the giveaway. We will do this next week, right? Because we don't figure out how to do it now.
Doing things on the flights, always situation.
Yeah. So that's it.
Thank you, Shane, very much for your time and being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, definitely. We'll see you all on Discord.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, obrigado, galera. Um abração para todo mundo aí. Muito obrigado para você que esteve aí na maratona acompanhando todos os vídeos. Para você que está assistindo a gravação aí, obrigado também. E vamos fazer o Ângelo pintar a barba de azul se a gente conseguir 4.000 inscritos no canal nesse mês. Beleza? Falou, pessoal. Um abração aí. Não esquece de doar aí. Lê o QR Code aí. Entra no Discord lá que a gente vai postar os links. A discussão vai continuar lá. Não fica participando desses comunidades de empresa que vende curso, mano. Participa da comunidade raiz, onde os caras pintam a barba de verde, onde tem os careca, o Jesus que não toma banho, mas transforma vinho em água. Mano, vamos pra comunidade água e vinho.
Jesus,
eu faço isso. Eu transformo vinho em água.
E principalmente porque a gente tem um foco muito de comunidade mesmo. Então essas ações aí que o Jesus tem trazido para nós, de doação, tudo, a ideia da comunidade é essa, pessoal. A gente não está aqui para ganhar dinheiro, não. É contribuir. E se a gente puder ajudar, tá aí o link, entra lá, dá uma mão, dá uma força.
Exatamente, ó. Vou falar uma coisa que pouca gente sabe. Pouca gente sabe, até eu acho que o Ângelo não sabe qual o dia de aniversário do Monkey Nights. Quando a gente fez o primeiro evento do Monkey Nights?
Foi em maio, cara.
Foi 1º de maio.
Foi em maio, foi 1º de hoje. Hoje, exatamente.
Hoje o Monkey Nights está fazendo aniversário. Eu não vou entrar no Facebook para olhar lá, mas foi 1º de maio lá. Acho que 2014 ou 2013. Não vou lembrar. Faz tempo pra caramba.
Putz, também não... Pra caramba.
Mas a gente está fazendo aniversário hoje, e aí eu vou dizer assim para vocês. Poxa, dê esse presente pra gente. Entra lá no Discord, vamos continuar as conversas lá. A gente só tá aqui porque a gente vê vocês aí. Então, se a gente não vê ninguém, não faz sentido a gente estar aqui, né? Dá para jogar videogame, dá para ficar assistindo série, né não? Então,
verdade.
O estímulo
e hoje, dia 1º de maio,
a gente tá aqui, né?
E hoje, 1º de maio, é uma data triste também, que é a data de falecimento do Senna, né, cara? Perdemos até as contas de quantos anos o Senna morreu, há quanto tempo, em 94 que ele morreu, né? E tá aí um cara que faz falta, hein? Puta merda, esse cara faz falta, hein, velho? Esse era ídolo de verdade, hein? Ô, Jesus, cara, leva o Bolsonaro e devolve o Senna, mano. Tem como?
Fala com teu pai lá.
Fala com teu pai aí, Jesus. Tem como?
Faz uma troca. Essa troca vale a pena, cara.
Porra, cara.
Nossa, mas essa é bem aquela troca, né? Você quer trocar essa Ferrari por uma bicicleta? Sim!
Fechado.
Essa troca o cara nem duvida, velho. Você quer quando? Agora? Deixa eu... Pô, deixa eu só dar uma olhada aí, que eu não fui da polícia hoje, da polícia do... Ó, pelo amor de Deus, né? Tem 13 pessoas... não, pô, 28 ali. Tá bom. Não sei descer da polícia hoje. Tá bom. Bora lá.
Show de bola.
Fechou?
Beleza, gente.
É isso aí, galera. Semana
Fechou.
que vem a gente pretende voltar com as lives em ritmo normal. Não vamos dizer o dia ainda. Não vamos dizer quando. O que você vai fazer? A hora nem o dia. Se inscreve no canal. Ativa a notificação para você receber quando a gente for ao vivo. Porque aqui é assim, os bagulho rola na hora. Os caras pintam a barba de verde antes da live. Uns cortam o cabelo para tentar ficar bonito, né, Ângelo? Mas não funciona. Né?
E a gente só para dar um spoiler, não spoiler tão espolioso aí, mas tá rolando aí já um papo sobre aquele evento anual que é feito, que todo ano é feito. Aí a gente já começou-se a conversar sobre.
Então dizendo aí que parece que setembro.
Não sei. Dizem.
Então
sei lá.
Tá rolando aí. Então, fique esperto aí que logo vem novidade. Vai ter, né? Agora a gente tem uns caras aí que infiltrados nas empresas que podem trazer coisas bacanas, né?
Nem vem me pedir dinheiro, cara. Não tenho dinheiro. Nem vem me pedir dinheiro. Nem começa. Nem começa.
Dinheiro, eu quero informação. Informação é melhor.
O José Silva,
informação.
ele tá falando MS Build, Microsoft Build 2021. O Build vai ser dos dias 25, 26 e 27 de maio. E o evento que a gente tá falando é muito melhor que o Build.
É muito melhor. Pô, o Build é fichinha, rapaz. Você não tá ligado.
Respeita a polícia, rapaz.
Fique esperto, provavelmente setembro. Segundo semestre, com certeza. Talvez setembro, talvez outubro. Mas fica ligado aí que vai acontecer coisas legais aí. Beleza?
Pô, mas parece que vazou informações privilegiadas aí em github.com/.net/malve. Parece que vazou umas informações lá. Dá uma olhadinha.
O quê?
Sério?
Sério?
Vazou lá, cara. Tá tudo aberto, o código-fonte do Malve.
Eu tinha que dar outra coisa, mano. Tipo, alguém mandou um PR antes da hora.
Não, cara, o Jesus não deixa. Jesus tá lá. Jesus tá igual o goleiro com os PR ali.
Maldade.
Pô, show de bola trazer o Shane, né?
Tomar banho. Não posso sair na rua, se a polícia me parar, eu tô com o dedo verde. Até eu explicar aqui o dedo verde. É porque eu pintei a barba? Vou pra cadeia rapidão. Essa cara de maloqueiro, né?
Pessoal, outra que a gente podia fazer é o seguinte: se vocês gostariam que a gente trouxesse algum convidado ou convidada especial aí da Microsoft, do time, façam barulho lá nas redes sociais, marque o pessoal lá no Twitter e fala, ó, chega lá no Dave ou na Mad, sei lá, no Miguel de Casa, posta lá, entendeu? E aí, vai que, né? Vai que eles aparecem aí.
Ô, Will, só uma dica, se você sair na rua, fala que você tem glaucoma. Vai por mim.
Boa. Tá com o dedo verde, tô com o dedo glaucoma. Boa.
Meu Deus.
Ai, cacete. Magu, saudade dessa. Saudade, mano. Muita mesmo, velho. Você chama aí, pessoal?
Calma que em breve eu tô por aí.
Você tá voltando pra São Paulo, né?
Não tão breve quanto eu gostaria, mas em breve.
O Pokémon surgiu da toca dos Pokémons ali pra dar risada da piada do Magu.
Porra, grande Pokémon. A gente podia trazer o Pokémon qualquer dia também.
Pô, vamos trazer semana que vem lá, velho. O Pokémon, é que ele faz live todo dia também. Tem maior puta agenda ocupada de live aí. Tem que ser um dia que ele não tem live.
O Pokémon, a gente vai entrar em contato com a sua assessoria para tentar reservar pro ano que vem, em maio, nesse mesmo canal, pra você. Pokémon é nível, né?
Vamos ver se o Jeff Bezos libera ele, né, cara?
O Jeff Bezos.
Vamos ver se o Jeff Bezos libera ele, né? Ué, o cara é dono da Amazon, dono do Twitch, né, cara? Então, tem que ver se o cara libera ele.
Caralho, demorei pra entender. Demorei. Mas aí, ó, você que tá assistindo a gente, não conhece o canal do Pokémon, entra lá no twitch.tv/Pokémon. Porque esse é o cara, velho. Ele tá online todo dia, ensinando a galera a desenvolver, levando coisa legal. Olha, o Ione já deu a letra que a gente pode chamar ele no sábado, porque ele não faz live no sábado, mas eu sei que ele tem compromissos pessoais no sábado lá e não rola. A não ser que ele abra uma agenda, uma exceção pra gente.
Programação das ruas com o Pokémon. É outro nível. Programação das ruas.
É outro nível.
Programação, certo, direto da fronteira.
Programação raiz, cara.
Raiz.
Raiz.
É um misto de programação, Silvio Santos, com sorteio de brinde, com essas piadas no nível do Magu. Cara, você vê tudo lá. É muito louco.
Cara, é aquele esquema, cara. É programar em cadeira da mesa da cozinha, né? Essa negócio de cadeira de foguete, não, cara.
Cadeira de pista de corrida, caramba. O Pokémon, cara, é o showman da programação brasileira. Ele é o showman da programação brasileira. Ele é o cara que faz o rolê do live code em outro nível.
Ele é quase o chacrinha do código, né? O Pokémon.
Caraca,
se ele aparecer com a buzina...
Puta, é o Pokémon. Putz, se ele aparecer com a buzina, ele é o chacrinha.
É o chacrinha total.
Podia fazer a live do chacrinha, Pokémon. Descola uma buzina.
Porra, Pokémon. Pô, descola. Alô, Terezinha!
Galera ia fazer xixi, velho.
E
sorteio.
Cara, buzininha e sortear bacalhau e abacaxi pra galera, velho.
Nossa, mano, bacalhau e abacaxi, manda abacaxi pro cara pelo correio.
Manda, porra, cara, olha, cara. Pokémon teve uma vez que quase matou o Tonhão sem acento lá, mano. Meu Deus do céu.
Verdade.
O Gel. Fala aí.
Não. Eu ia falar que o Pokémon ficou marcado na vida do Tonhão. Quase matou o cara.
O Gel falou, falo com a galera que cadeiras de plástico dessas de boteco são as melhores, o Bebum fica nessas cadeiras o dia todo, não pode ser só pela cachaça, tem que ser algo minimamente confortável.
Tá anestesiado, velho. Anestesia, mano. É anestesia. Depois da quinta cachaçinha ali, você não sente mais nada. Pode ser sentado num bloco de concreto.
Geralmente essas pessoas têm o mesmo perfil de administrador de rede ou de DBA, você pode ver. DBA é um cara que você tem que olhar e tem que passar segurança para ele. Você chega um DBA, um carinha assim, fofinho, camisa ajeitada, barba feita, não contrata, cara. DBA tem que ser aquele cara que você já vê ele com bigode queimado de cigarro, já vê ele com a mão tremendo, aquele cara que já tá um pouco acima do peso, aquele cara que fala cuspindo. Esse é o DBA. Esse é raiz. Esse aí, cara, faz backup no quente e o sistema fica no ar, velho. Não tem. É desse nível aí. Ô, Pokémon, vamos fazer o seguinte, você falou, se tiver patrocínio de bacalhoada, rola sorteio. A gente pode fazer um crossover aí do Monkey Knight com Pokémon. A gente dá um bacalhau e o Pokémon...
a gente manda comida, manda peixada pra galera pelo iFood aí, ó. Vamos fazer um crossover.
Fazer um crossover aí, Pokémon. Fácil.
A gente faz um Pokémon macaco aí.
Um macaco. Tem algum Pokémon macaco com isso na hierarquia, na geopolítica
da Pokémon de
dos
tudo.
Pokémons? Já tô te chamando aí.
Tô espiando ali. Diga. Se eu posso devolver o seu celular? Posso também. Você já fez as tarefas?
Will, você
eu tenho que tomar um banho, tá muito ruim, esse negócio tá coçando.
Você sequestrou o celular da sua filha, Will?
Não, os acordos é o seguinte. A gente não cobra ela de ficar fazendo tarefa. Ela sabe que é a responsabilidade dela. E ela tem que fazer todo dia de manhã porque ela estuda de tarde no homeschooling, né? Não. E quando ela não cumpre as tarefas, tipo assim, acumula a tarefa e ela deixa para fazer no sábado, eu tiro o telefone dela e deixo aqui. Quando ela terminar, ela pega. Então,
a gente podia também fazer um Monkey Knight só com os filhos, né?
Só com os filhos, boa. Pô, Jesus ia trazer uns 50 mil. Não ia dar.
Aí não seria um Monkey Knight, seria uma bicha do galo. Ia ser uma bicha do galo, né, cara? Não é possível.
O Pokémon falou que tem o Mankey, eu não sei se eu tô falando certo, velho. O Aipon, o Prime Ape e muitos outros. Tem um monte de Pokémon macaco.
Cara, eu gostei de Mankey, que o Mankey tem várias, né? Vários significados,
Tem
né?
várias
Deu uma
conotações.
mancada, pô, tem várias Vamos
Esse é
fazer
bom,
esse
Pokémon.
crossover
Deixa eu procurar a foto dele aqui, velho. Peraí.
Vai ser o Pokéknight ou vai
Aí, ó.
ser o Monkey-Mon?
Pokémon.
Pokémon.
Ia ser
Pô,
sensacional, cara.
Esse Mankey, que bicho sinistro, velho. Na verdade, não tem nada de macaco, viu? Deixa eu compartilhar aqui com vocês, porque ele tá mais parecendo um. Tipo, tu pegar um porco, cruzar com um macaco. Eu vou compartilhar para vocês verem.
Cara, que
Magu,
gosto sairia o bacon disso, se cruzar um porco com um macaco?
Ó, imagina um macaco com focinho
Nossa.
de porco.
Nossa.
E com
Tá
pelo
ligado?
meio
Então,
branco,
Imagina que
caramelo, sei lá.
Imagina que é um mico-leão com uma cabeça de porco peluda e branca. Esse é o.
Então, é um
Pokémon.
mico-leão caramelizado.
O bicho é estranho, mano.
Nossa, esse é mais estranho ainda.
Não, tem duas fotos. Uma que é a cara mais pra porco e a outra que é a cara mais pra macaco. Só que a cara é tipo redonda, como se fosse uma bola.
Ele lembra um pouco o Nogari, ô Magus. Se você puxar na consciência aí, o rosto do Nogari é mais ou menos isso. Só que o Nogari deve soltar mais pelo.
Tá. Provavelmente. Provavelmente. Não, e pelo menos esse bicho aí ele deve se comunicar por língua de sinais, né? O Nogari é meio difícil, assim. A gente tem que ficar desenhando toda hora, é meio tenso.
Nogari
Mas
adora aqueles livros de pintar, cara.
Não, mas novamente, cara, vamos lá, a gente tem que dar o braço a torcer, que eu repito essa história toda hora, porque eu fico muito emocionado mesmo do cara escrever 3 livros ditando palavra por palavra pra esposa, isso sim é exemplo de superação, cara.
Exatamente. 3 livros que o Nogari lançou, a esposa dele, que foi quase uma psicografia. A primeira psicografia com pessoa viva.
Isso,
né?
exato.
A esposa dele escrevendo o livro, o Nogari na orelha dela falou, vai lá, select, asterisco, né?
Eu só queria dizer que o Prime Ape tem nome de bife de churrascaria. Me vê um Prime Ape aí bem passado ou no ponto. Tem nome de...
Não, o cara vem, né, com o bife pendurado assim no espeto e fala, Prime Ape, senhor? Aí eu dou fatia, por favor.
Dá 2 fatias de Prime Ape aí.
E a iPhone não parece nome de marca de fralda de criança?
iPhone? Pode ser, é uma fralda da Apple, né?
iPhone.
É uma fralda com AirTag.
iPhone, né?
Isso. É uma fralda com AirTag. Quando você perde o bebê, você vai lá e procura. Deixa eu ver, né? Find my iPhone.
Sabe o que eu acho massa, mano? É que a gente no bar, a gente fica 5 dias. Porque a gente vai emendando um assunto no outro, daqui a pouco a gente saiu lá do bacalhau e já tá na Apple.
Sim.
Mas aproveitando, vocês viram o AirTag, né?
Sim.
Sim.
Aí lançaram um AirTag com a pulseirinha da Hermès. Aí o AirTag normal custa tipo 93 custa acho que 90 e poucos dólares. O da Hermès custa 400 e poucos dólares.
Não,
a única coisa que muda é o corinho.
Mas é a mesma coisa com as pulseiras, é a mesma coisa com o Apple Watch. É a mesma coisa. Você pega o Apple Watch, ele é o mesmo, identicamente o mesmo, só que ele custa 10 vezes mais, porque tem a marquinha da Hermès. Mas eu fiquei sabendo que a esposa do Nogari também já encomendou umas para não perder o Nogari.
Não, Nogari é
difícil segurar ele para colocar o AirTag.
Então, tanto que no último Summit a gente tomava cuidado para não deixar o Rodolfo muito perto do Nogari, senão ele entrava em órbita, né?
Cara, até hoje eu lembro, cara, a gente indo pro aeroporto de Seattle, um frio da desgraça, você lembra, Magu? Frio da desgraça. A gente entra, cara, tem um cara jogado nas cadeiras, assim, do aeroporto. Eu falei assim, nossa, cara. Homeless total. Barbudo, toda a barba tudo desgruvinhado. Quando ele chega perto do Nogari, velho. Ele, porra, mano, cacete, tô quebrado, velho. Cheguei aqui há 4 horas, tô deitado.
Já tinha umas moedas ali no chão.
Ai, cacete, o lugar é foda. É outro que a gente precisa trazer aqui, só pra gente deixar ele aqui, só pra gente tirar sarro dele, não precisa falar de nada.
Né?
Sensacional.
Mas tem várias histórias. Outro dia ele me chamou aqui no WhatsApp pra ver se eu tava bem e tal. A gente começou a trocar ideia, mano. Nossa, só dei risada só.
O Nogari me manda às vezes umas mensagens, cara, que você chora de rir, velho. Você chora de rir mesmo. Depois eu mando, Magu, porque é proibido pra menores de 80 anos. Cara,
não dá.
Não dá.
Só história.
Tá
Só a história da velhinha apontando o dedo na cara dele, falando que ele era mal educado, já.
Eu tava lá, cara. Juro pra você, se essa pessoa fosse uns 10 anos mais nova, ela tinha dado na cara do Nogari, velho.
Sim.
Eu falei, gente do céu. E a gente sério, né? Não podia rir, né? Porque vai saber se a tiazinha é agressiva, né? Cara, o Nogari é foda, velho.
Os caras, eu tenho medo do Nogari, cara. Aquele dia eu achei que a gente ia ficar preso, velho. Com segurança lá no aeroporto. Dia...
Puta merda, cara. Só cagada, né, velho?
Falei, é hoje.
Discutir.
É hoje. Eu só quero voltar pro Brasil, cara. Eu não quero ficar preso aqui. Não, assim, e ser preso no melhor dos casos, né, cara? Que se aquele cara decidir dar um tapa na gente, o cara o cara enterrava a gente na hora, né?
O cara era um monstro, bicho. O cara era tipo. Ele é maior que. Eu e o Nogari deve ter a mesma altura. O cara devia ter uns 1,86 m, o cara era grandão, Mago. Sim. O cara era grandão e forte, deu pra ver pra voz do cara, né? O cara não falou gritando com a gente, ele falou educadamente, só que ele saiu. Vai pro outro lado! O Nogari, mas veja só, senhor, eu que mando aqui! Nós vazamos, cara. Cara, cada história, meu Deus do céu. Mas aí, fechamos então. A gente vai fazer o crossover aí com o Pokémon. Vamos fazer aqui uma distribuição de bacalhau.
De comida.
O Pokémon já vai produzir de comida. O Pokémon vai providenciar aí a buzina, né? E a cartola. Ele usava uma cartola também, Pokémon. Já vai. Puxa aí, ó. Puxa a capivara do Chacrinha e vai ser.
Parafraseando o próprio Pokémon, vai ser show.
A gente vai fazer o bar do Pokémon. Aí, no sábado é o bar do Pokémon. Sei lá, ou qualquer outro dia aí que ele for fazer uma live, a gente faz o bar do Pokémon. Cola lá no bar, né? E aí, toca a buzina, toma cerveja e joga a conversa fora.
Fechado, que maravilha, cara.
Fechou.
O Antônio perguntou se vai ter outra maratona. Eu não sei, mano, porque tá tendo não pode ter aglomeração, né? Então.
A São Silvestre foi cancelada, né? Até onde eu sei.
Mancada. O Tonhão. Não é o Tonhão sem acento, é o Antônio. Antônio, seguinte, cara, a gente tem alguns planos de fazer várias coisas durante o ano. Mas, cara, sugiram aí, cara. Tragam pra gente.
Qual tema aí que você quer ver transformado em maratona que a gente dá.
Só não vai falar maratona de Maui porque o Maui não foi lançado.
Tá? A gente foi fazer uma palestra de Maui quando foi? Essa semana? Segunda ou terça?
Foi
hoje a gente tá falando de Maui. Mano, não tem muita coisa para falar, não tem nem muita coisa para mostrar ainda, né? Então é bem complicado, tipo, na verdade assim, dá para conversar, dá para falar de futurologia, do que a gente espera, do que está acontecendo. Mas efetivamente mostrar coisa, tem muito pouca coisa para mostrar. Eu ainda acho que demora aí mais umas dois previews aí para a gente já ter coisa para brincar de verdade, assim, mostrar a mão na massa, né? Para valer.
Esse push
notifications que é o gatekeeper do mal e lá pode dizer se eu estou mentindo ou não.
Não, o que dá para mostrar agora mesmo tipo, arquitetura no geral, código, como é que está se ficando e como é que você faria um custom control para o Maui, como é que você implementaria o seu próprio. Mas assim, criar um app não dá.
Dá pra fazer um app de uma página lá, só single page app e
com os 3 controles.
E não dá nem para fazer deploy ainda, né? Para botar em produção.
Não dá.
O Antônio falou de push notification com Shelll. Cara, assim, push notification é push notification. Se é Shelll, se não é.
Push notification não existe. Shell, mas aí, pode fazer
relação.
Dá para fazer uma live implementando push notification com o Xamarin. Dá pra fazer
é meio burocrático. Provavelmente a gente já fez alguma coisa assim, né?
Cara, é chato só.
Não, tipo assim, burocrático no... então, eu acho que burocrático pela quantidade de passos que você tem que fazer, de criar o serviço, vou usar o Firebase, gerar na Apple lá.
É um configuration hell que você faz para um negócio que, mano, depois você plugou as pontas ali, já era.
Putz, chega e vai bonitão. Faz uma votação online com algumas sugestões. Mano, mandem vocês.
Manda sugestão aí, ó.
Não,
vamos fazer votação sobre o que a gente quer. Ó, vamos fazer sobre o que vocês querem. Né? Se não, a gente vai fazer live de Corinthians, porque o Ângelo só gosta disso, né?
Bacon.
Do Jesus, a gente vai falar de Evangelho, né?
Aí, ó.
O Magu de cerveja.
Lógico.
Né? E eu de qualquer coisa. Mas a gente vai falar de coisas que sejam úteis para vocês. Ó, uma maratona sobre MVU aí, ó. MVU. Pode ser? Pode ser?
Uma maratona sobre React UI.
Pode ser?
Pode ser?
Reactive UI é legal.
Aí, ó.
Reactive
Já
UI,
estamos, ó. Brainstorming, já tá chegando coisa aí. A gente podia fazer assim, ó. Quem doar mais para quem tem fome, tem pressa, escolhe o próximo tema da maratona. E aí a gente se vira nos 30.
Aí sim.
Que nem o...
Compartilha o comprovante lá e quem doar mais escolhe.
Boa.
Mano, pode ser
que
AK,
então, mas
.net.
Só não pode Java. Só não pode Java.
Mas, José, deixa eu entender.
Se o cara doar uns 50 mil ali pro negócio, a gente faz de Java também, velho.
Cara.
Mas, José, explica aí, por que o AK.net... Da onde que surgiu essa ideia de AK.net React UI, cara? Pra mim, as coisas são tão distantes assim, cara.
Mano, AK pra mim é aqueles negócios lá dos... Ah, não, aquilo é Haka.
Haka,
Que eles fazem na Nova Zelândia.
Essa questão de, por exemplo, o AK, na XP a gente tá testando algumas coisas com atores, não só com AK, com Orleans, também com o Giannichini, toda a galera toda... E, cara, isso aí são cenários tão complexos para você aplicar isso daí, mas tão complexos que eu não consigo enxergar, por exemplo, onde a gente conseguiria colocar React UI com AK.net. Assim, não consegue. Ó, o José de novo fala assim, ó, de repente, ó, Avalon UI, a gente pode fazer algumas brincadeiras também, de repente, de fazer um File New Project e sentar no vareio. Instala aqui e tenta ver o que acontece.
Entendeu? Eu queria brincar ali com...
Eu passei mais raiva do que...
isso que eu ia falar, tipo, eu não queria falar para todo mundo, mas foi mais isso a sensação. Foi mais raiva do que qualquer outra coisa. Mas o Ângelo gosta de Uno.
Eu gosto de Uno, cara, eu acho muito legal.
Inclusive falou que o Xamarin ia morrer.
Morreu? Aí, ó. Aí, só.
Cara, Uno, Detetive... banco imobiliário, eu curto tudo isso aí, velho.
O Uno é da hora, o jogo Uno é muito legal.
Jogo da vida.
Jogo da vida.
Eu curto pra caramba,
cara a cara, da hora. O Blazes or Binds, mano, é a mesma coisa, José. Não dá pra ser nada, assim, tipo... É muito novo, assim.
O Zé perguntou ali, eu já tô chamando de Zé, já virou brother. No evento da JetBrains sobre Rider, eles falaram sobre a Valônia. Tem alguma relação entre o Valônia? A única relação é que você pode usar o Rider para desenvolver com a Valônia. É
que eles têm um plugin interessante com o Rider, entendeu? Mas, putz, nada além disso. Mas, cara, se o Avalônia...
vai estar no caixão dele, escrito assim, ó.
Vai.
Aqui já Angel, o cara que disse que o Uno ia matar o Xamarin.
Exatamente, essa vai ficar gravada para sempre. Mas, assim, o Avalônia, cara, putz, eu instalei e, assim, eu não tive boa experiência em escrever código, assim, para ele, cara. A gente pode ir novamente, sei lá, fazer um File New Project aí e brincar, mas, cara, dá para usar MVVM, ele tem algumas coisas legais, cara, do tipo de style ser parecido um pouco com CSS, mas você cria o seu style do jeito decente e usa com elemento, ponto, alguma coisa, sabe? Então, Ele tem algumas coisas assim. A parte de bind é um pouco diferente. Ele já tinha antes a parte de grids, que você colocava, por exemplo, no call definitions, as larguras das colunas separadas por vírgula, sem precisar você colocar como tag. Então tinha muita coisa legal. Mas, cara, na boa, eu acho que é muito imaturo ainda. Tá na versão 0. Alguma coisa e, tipo, é meio treta você fazer alguma coisa. Mas podemos brincar também.
Isso aí. Galera, beirando as 18 horas aqui.
É isso aí, já tá na hora de eu tomar banho, porque ó, essa barba aqui tá mais dura do que pão
Aproveita,
velho.
Will, aproveita que é sábado, é um dia bom pra tomar banho, cara.
Tá louco. Tá dando agonia aqui, coçando.
Mas, galera...
Mas é isso aí, galera. Eu paguei a aposta. Só quero dizer isso. Eu paguei a aposta. Tá?
Estamos em débito aí, estamos em dívida, mas nós vamos quitar essa dívida aí.
Mas é isso aí, pessoal. Um grande abraço para todo mundo. E vocês puderam presenciar aqui um pouco das borrachas que a gente fala depois que desliga a live, que a gente falou ao vivo aqui para todo mundo. Falou? Ó,
beleza,
vou
pessoal.
ter que doar 50 mil para falar de Java. 50 mil. Você doar 50 mil para quem tem fome, que tem pressa, a gente fica um ano inteiro falando de Java.
Sorrindo ainda.
Ó, 50 mil reais.
E a gente dá até para tentar trazer o Bruno Borges da Microsoft lá, que agora é colega do
A gente
Magu.
traz o Javaman, o Bruno Borges, a Loiane. A gente traz todo mundo. Vira um canal de Java. Você doar 50 mil para quem tem fome, que tem pressa.
Ô, Antônio, você tá tirando. O corintiano não paga, ele roubou. Presta atenção aí, malandro. Olha esse negócio aí, Magu. O cara tá tirando o Corinthians aqui, velho.
Nem merece, cara.
Já não zoa o corintiano, mano. O time já tá zoando ele direto.
Cara, o Avalônia me frustra tanto quanto o Corinthians, cara, ultimamente.
Mas é isso aí, gente. Um abração, Jesus.
Falou, gente.
Abração, gente. Até mais.
Valeu, um abraço, pessoal. Tchau.
Jesus, que teu pai te abençoe.
Eu vou botar a musiquinha, só porque o Magu gosta. Falou.